Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. So today is going to be a little bit of a sillier video as I kind of want to draw my OCs today, but there is going to be kind of a specific theme. So to kind of like preface the video, I was playing around and just looking up different brushes on the XPPen Asset store. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but to kind of like start off today's video, I went ahead and found like a Tumblr blog that had a bunch of different draw your squad poses or bases or memes, whatever you want to call it, and I was trying my best to see if I could find the original posters for each of these. So I screenshotted some of the usernames, but I'll make sure to link them down below if I could find the original link. If not, I'll just link down the Tumblr. But if you like to draw along with me, feel free to peruse that Tumblr to find some of these cute bases. So that is what we are going to be doing today. I picked out a few different ones that I think would fit kind of like my OC's dynamic for the most part. And I wanted at least one that had enough to fill in for all of my current OCs that I want to draw. So I needed a base that had 7 people. This one worked so well for 7 people, and I already kind of assigned all of the characters or like the bases to be specific OCs like right away because I found it so fitting. So I'll make sure to put like a little chibi headshot of all of my OCs that I'm going to be drawing today on the screen with their names so that if you're not familiar with them or you need a refresher, then here they are. I know I got a recent comment like saying I should do more of like a video talking about like the general story and like who are my characters, so I'll definitely do that in the future. I might do it after I have Akemi's siblings like fully fleshed out, alongside with like Selwyn having his design being 100% like confirmed in terms of like color scheme, accessories, and all that stuff, because I just didn't have time quite yet to fully flesh out what accessories or details that I want to include. His like base is pretty much just finished, so yeah. Onto the drawing. So like I mentioned, I wanted to do something silly today and just draw OCs, but the draw your squad kind of like bases, memes, whatever you want to call them, are something very fun to do, and it can kind of either push you to draw your characters in more like fun expressions, poses, scenarios, or you can kind of like draw them a little bit out of their characters a little bit. But like I mentioned, this one in particular I found so fitting. So the little guy in the center, like where everyone's kind of like staring and gesturing to, I wanted it to be Selwyn because he's kind of like the newcomer of my OCs, and technically story or like lore wise, I think Selwyn would only make like a cameo or like a slight appearance, or maybe he'll be like a fantasy character or something on a TV show that appears in Masaki's timeline and universe, but I don't think he's going to be officially in Masaki's universe. I did juggle with the idea like maybe he'll just be like somebody you see in Masaki's university life and just never interact with. But I think I want to keep their things separate, so if I ever wanted to expand on Selwyn's story in the future, then I can go in a different route. Similar to like my little OC mascot, cat little critter, Hansuke. So he's kind of in Masaki's world as either like a children's show or like a little plushy kind of character mascot, instead of like, you know, being sentient or anything like that. But like in Hansuke's own world, he would have like his own adventures kind of thing. Then we do have our second base that I'm going to be working on. I'm going to talk about each of the bases a little bit more once we get to like the line art and coloring, but for the very first one, I wanted to have all of my OCs like pretty much follow very similarly to the expressions that the base had. I think for the most part, all 3 of the different bases that I chose, I tried my best to follow more or less the expressions, because like I said, that's kind of like the fun part about it, is trying to match which OC would be what kind of position or like whichever character that's in the base. So for the second one, I ended up having Kaisen in the center being dragged or lifted by Moriko and Masaki. Now, unfortunately, because I haven't drawn Moriko in a long time, or like doodled her as much as I used to, I actually forgot how her outfit looked, since I mostly did like headshots or something whenever I doodled her. So I did have to open up a reference every so often on my phone and or like on the screen so that I could draw her at least a little bit more accurately. Now, unfortunately for this one, the proportions are going to be a lot more skewed. I realized a little bit too late, and mostly when I was doing the line art, that the arm on both of the characters carrying the center person are extremely long. So I try elongating both Masaki and Moriko's legs a bit, but Moriko's arm still seems a little bit too long, so I didn't really correct it. But moving on to the third one, so kind of like something different I didn't do for this one compared to the first two is that I ended up just using the base as like the reference instead of drawing on top of it to keep things more proportionate. Just because these ones are a little bit more cartoony, I didn't want to accidentally fall into simplifying my OCs too much to follow the base specifically. I think it was a little bit easier for the first two because they're a bit more similarly proportioned to how I would draw my characters, so I didn't really mind. But for this one, because it is so stylized, it was just easier for me to just follow the general positionings and composition of each of the different characters together and then just draw them as is. And this one was very fun to play around with some of the expressions. So for our little movie scene, I have Kaisen and then I have Sato with the drink, and it makes a little bit more sense because some of the little tiny chibi emotes that I've drawn of my OCs actually kind of fits these expressions. So I do have like a crying one for Moriko. I do have one that has Sato drinking a drink. She's not drinking it like angrily or anything, but she is the only one like sipping on a drink in any of my little chibi emote sticker type of drawings. This one was a little bit easier to assign the characters as well. So Kaisen not being super pleased about the movie they're watching. I did change Sato so she's a little bit more like pissed off rather than, I don't know how you would describe the center character, the one with the drink in the reference, but I ended up making that Sato. And then Moriko's the one crying because she's a little bit more of like a softy, very highly emotional type of person. Then the surprised one in the very back is Masaki, and then grabbing onto Akemi who's trying to leave. Now I know the expression for like Akemi is not exactly the same, but in this context I feel like it fit a little bit better. But here's kind of like the overall look of the sketch. So after I finish sketching, I'm going to lower down the opacity and we're going to work on inking and or line art. And this is kind of like the reason I even wanted to do this video is because, like I mentioned at the very beginning, I was kind of perusing the Clip Studio asset store and downloading a bunch of like patterns or brushes or like any type of material downloads and stuff just for fun, again because I love perusing it whenever I want to draw and doodle for fun. So also I think Clip Studio Paint has a 60% off right now, so if you want to buy Clip Studio Paint, highly recommend doing it whenever they have a discount, so do check it out. But this brush in particular, so something about it just screamed more like simple doodle, almost like cartoony or comic-ish. So it kind of has a bumpier, rougher texture, and I don't know, there's something about it I do like about the line quality of it. So like the thickness, the texture, it also can taper. I'm just choosing to keep everything pretty like standardly the same width for the most part, but you can get a little bit more of like a line width variation if you want to, and it's just something that I was like really liking. So I'll make sure to link the brush into the description if you're interested. It does have a Korean name, but because I don't have my Clip Studio Paint open currently, I'm not going to attempt to try to read it right now. But I think like the bolder lines kind of worked for these little draw your squad. Now I will talk about coloring in a bit, but I ended up not doing full color, and part of it was because I was just getting tired. I was drawing this very late into the night, and the way how I film oftentimes like my larger tablet screen, it caused my back and my shoulder to feel very stiff because I didn't want to accidentally encroach into the camera angle too much. So my tablet's like at a very weird angle, my camera's like almost near in front of my face, so I need to try to find a more optimal way to do it. So hopefully you guys don't mind too much if the view of like my tablet kind of gets more skewed towards like a side-ish view, not fully, but just a little bit more tilted like I've done in the past. For some reason I just did it a little bit differently today, and it was a little bit more like not super front on, but just a tad bit more front on than usual, I guess. Oh, also, I ended up doing the majority of like the inking, I believe the coloring and stuff, similar to the sketch in mostly time lapse, because I always find inking a little bit tedious to watch if it's all in real time, and because I took a long time to just even do the line art, I didn't want to bore you guys, so I ended up putting it into time lapse so you can kind of see all of it come together slowly. But back to the first little draw your squad. This one was just fun because I like the little derpy expression for Selwyn, which is directly based off of the one of the reference or like the draw your squad base. And then I think the only expression I really changed for the most part is I think Koji and Moriko. So Moriko's the one that's going like the almost like Pog, oh my god kind of face looking at Selwyn, and the one behind her is the one of Koji. So Koji is looking at Akemi, and to be honest, I think personality wise, Akemi doesn't fit the kind of like menacing person in the back, but I did also have like a little chibi version that's kind of similar with him being kind of sinister, and I low-key just gave him that position because he's the one with glasses, and it was a little bit easier when I block in kind of like the dark silhouette of him being ominous. It just works out because his glasses can still stand out, they can still have like a little bit of shine and all that. And then because Sato is into like, you know, confectionery stuff, baking, sweets, all that stuff, so I gave her the character in the very back. We have Masaki fawning over Selwyn because he's in love with like little very small cute little things, and then obviously Kaisen's kind of like the judgmental one in the front, so he's like, who the heck is this guy? But I do think like in the future, I'm gonna try my best to use this brush a little bit more, especially for like these fun little OC either scenarios or comics, because it's very easy to use. I don't think it's like what I want to use 100% if I were to make a story for my OCs, but it's very easy to use and like for me, very approachable. Like I don't feel too conscious about making my lines like super duper clean, or like I don't mind the fact that it's a little bit on the thicker side, because when I do simplify a lot of like the character shapes, or you know, don't want to do a lot of detail, I like the bold line look for the most part. And that's like something I try to juggle with a lot of the time, is between, do I want to go thinner lines, go more detailed like my pencil work, or do I want to go more simple but have bolder lines, maybe have more contrast? And because I didn't do like full color, I kind of regret not doing it, because I think it would match the lines a lot better. You'll see what I end up doing for the color. You probably saw it from the thumbnail as well, so it's not too much of a surprise. But it does, I think it would suit like flat colors or like very simple cell shading or something. So maybe I'll play around with these ones in a bit. But for the second one, so we have Kaisen being kind of dragged out by Moriko and Masaki. I always thought like Moriko and Masaki, because they're a little bit more of like my ball of sunshine characters. Masaki more so like he's very friendly, approachable, but he's more on the calmer side if anything. But like in contrast to Kaisen, he's a little bit more sillier because of his, he's a little bit more naive-ish in a sense, or like doesn't pick up on stuff as quickly as Kaisen. So like I feel like he gets Kaisen into different scenarios, which is not in his favor. So between like Masaki and Kaisen, Masaki would be doing more like slightly sillier things, and then Kaisen's more of like the straight man where he's like more serious, doesn't deal with the bull crap or whatever. And then Moriko, she's like my literal ball of sunshine. She's very cheerful, very energetic, very outgoing. So I feel like her and Masaki together would often get Kaisen into more uncomfortable, or like want to drag him out to go do other things. So in this case, maybe Kaisen didn't want to go outside because it's too hot, and Moriko and Masaki want to hang out, so they want to drag Kaisen along with them, you know, go touch grass, get out of your house, that kind of vibe. I think I've already talked about the last one a lot more compared to the other two, but we have Kaisen kind of like not really enjoying the movie as much. So in terms of the text that I gave them, I kind of imagine them watching a really terrible kind of like rom-com type of movie. So Kaisen doesn't understand like, you know, what the heck is going on in the movie, because he probably thinks everything's like unrealistic, kind of very silly. Then I think for the text, I gave Sato saying, I hate that man, I hate this man. Most likely she does not like really approve of the male lead. Sometimes in like rom-coms, they're so silly, and you think like, why would the female lead take the man back or whatever, or like the male lead back? low-key like red flag behavior. And I feel like because Moriko's more of an optimist and she's like, you know, feels stuff very heavily, she's very empathetic, sympathetic, all of that jazz. So she'd probably be crying thinking like, oh, the couple getting back together or her choosing the male lead once again is so sweet. And since she's just crying on Sato's shoulder. I don't know, I thought it was just very fitting for the two of them. And then we have a little bit more of like simpler expressions more or less for Masaki and Akemi. So for Masaki, we do have like more of that shocked expression. Maybe he's also low-key in disbelief of being like, oh, why would this couple get together kind of thing. And then we have Akemi, who probably also is not fully invested into the movie, so he's just gonna get up in the middle of maybe this is like the climax of the movie to go get a drink, and then, you know, Masaki's like, hey, wait, like something's gonna happen, you can't leave. And maybe out of instinct, he grabs onto Akemi's shoulder, whoever's like next to him, or he's telling him like, you can't leave, something's going to happen, you're gonna miss it. So that's kind of the vibe for this movie. So just before we get into the coloring, you can kind of see like I picked more or less, I think, the size 17 brush for the first Draw Your Squad doodle, and then after that I did size 12 for the smaller one of like the trio, and then I did size 12 also for the movie scene. But the movie one and the one that's like, oh, look at Selwyn being like the little embarrassed guy in the center, are the ones that I wish that I ended up doing more of like flat colors, but doing like a full color drawing rather than keeping it how I ended up doing just very simple flat monochromatic look for the entirety of it. But at least for the most part, the line art portion went without a hitch. It became very easy for me. I don't dislike the lines too much. Maybe because like these are kind of like doodle-esque, I don't really mind. But right away, I'm gonna fill in kind of like our silhouetted or Akemi in the shadows look. So I went ahead, just used the selection tool. We started filling in all the blacks so that we can make him kind of more into the shadow, give a little bit of lighting here and there. I'll give a little bit of glare to his glasses, and then we can move on to trying to figure out how I want to color the rest of the gang. I do think like either I will go back and color these in properly, or I will do another session and we can pick another set of fun different Draw Your Squad bases, and I can do another set for my OCs and maybe do full color. One big reason that I didn't do like full color for these ones is, one, I was just getting tired, and coloring in multiple characters I knew was going to drain me super badly. But the other reason is that once I started to fill in, I think it was Moriko and part of Kaisen, they have some like open lines, which because I was just having fun inking, I wasn't really taking in consideration of like how easy it would be to do like bucket filling or filling in flats. So as soon as I saw that if I bucket in Moriko's skin tone, it already bleeded into her hair because I didn't complete the lines, I was like, oh, maybe I don't want to spend like all the time manually filling everything. So instead I ended up just picking kind of a mid-tone-ish, well, it's not quite a mid-tone, well, it's like lighter side of mid-tone, of a kind of like dustier blue color to fill in more or less just cell shading. So it kind of works if you have like stronger lighting, so that it kind of gives that atmosphere. I think it works kind of better for the movie scene than this one, but this was just kind of fun because I could just fill in certain things of different values and then give a little bit of highlights to give slightly a little bit more dimension to certain parts like the hair. I could give a little bit more of highlights on the clothing folds so that they don't read just as one flat color. Other than that, I kind of like the blue look if I just stuck with it entirely. I didn't really like how I did the one that's like the triple like dragging Kaisen out of his house kind of one. So we're gonna try to do something a little bit different for that, and I'll add a little bit of like gradations to each of our flats anyways, so just to give it a little bit more visual interest. As for the eyes, I treat it the same way how I typically color in eyes. So because when I do line art, I do fill them all completely black. So if I'm using black line art, I'll color the eyes completely black so that later on I can either alpha lock it or I can kind of like clip layers to it and color on top of it. It's just easier for me to visualize which way they're looking and keeping the size kind of consistent. I do find like if I do outlines for the irises, sometimes they get a little bit more skewed, or I feel too compelled to like drop in their highlights and their pupils right away, and I don't really like doing that for my style, so I end up either leaving them completely blank or keeping them completely filled in, so it's like one or the other. So for shading for the movie one, I did just fill in everybody all together, and it was easier for me to just pull out the highlights, because if you're usually watching a movie, the screen is very bright, so we got a light source, and then you're usually in a darker room, so I wanted to just take the easier route. Instead of like manually filling everything in with my blue color, it was easier for me to just pull out the highlights to kind of give the illusion that they're more or less in a dark room being illuminated for something on the left hand side. At this point, I also realized that I accidentally shuffled my colors for the first base over a smidge, so I'm gonna have to crop it and slightly move it back, because I don't know if it's like my keyboard shortcuts or like me using the tour box, sometimes I hold down the wrong button and it causes me to drag whatever's on the current layer over a little bit when I'm trying to pan, and because of that some of my colors got shifted before I started working on the second and the third little draw your squads. And then for colors, so for the trio, I ended up putting Moriko's color, Masaki's color, and Kaisen's color for their individual bodies, and then for the other two I added like soft gradations. So I ended up putting more of like a red embarrassed kind of, I don't know, intense color in the center for Selwyn, seeing like he has like all this pressure on him, and he's feeling very like nervous and embarrassed. And then I added a little bit of highlights or a glow to the edges of the little movie scene. And then lastly, I just made the colors a little bit lighter for our trio so it wasn't as dark. And I think in the future I would like to kind of like doodle and sketch like this in the future. I don't know if you can consider these doodles. They might be a little bit too clean to be doodles because I ended up doing line art. But I had a lot of fun working on these. I would like to do more in the future, and would like to play around with just even more brushes, or trying to figure out a way that I might want to do like little OC comics again in the future, if I want to do like full color and focus on line art a little bit more. But I think that's it for today's little video. I know it was a little bit scatterbrained in terms of my voiceover as usual. I am running very low on sleep, and like I mentioned, working on this one did drain me quite a bit because of drawing multiple characters, but I would love to do more just with my OCs in general. So yeah, if you want to see more of my OCs, do let me know, or like if you want scenarios again for my OCs, or just want me to do more of these draw your squad memes, I will definitely do more in the future, and or playing around with more comic kind of like ideas, definitely. So I think that is it for today's video. Hopefully you guys don't mind that is majority time lapse and just me rambling about different things, but I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!